Welcome back to the Pittsburgh Basketball Show. I'm your host, George Michalowski, back with another episode. It's been a little bit, but we've had some time off for this summer. Now we're getting back into the thick of it in the recruiting world. We've gone through the period of top 10 lists, top 5 lists, top 9s. We've had just about every number of a top school list for Pitt and for Duquesne. There's been a lot of news revolving those two programs in the recruiting world. But now we're on to the official visit part of the season. These kids are getting back to their high schools for the semester. They're planning out their visits for the fall, and commitments are going to start rolling in to programs around the country. There are still 7 prospects in the class of 2025 with Pitt on their top school list. We've got huge names on that list that we're monitoring, we're watching. We've got news on this week. We've got new visits popping up for these kids. So really a lot of news going on in the Pitt basketball recruiting world. And I'm going to go through all 7 of those prospects, starting with one of the 2 that visited this past weekend, Omari Witherspoon. Omari Witherspoon late last night, late Tuesday night, came out with his top 3 list. He cut a bunch of programs from his recruitment, narrowed it down to 3. The 3 are Pitt, Maryland, and Vanderbilt. So programs that if you see on paper as a Pitt fan, you're pretty happy about being compared to those 2. Not the best track record in the past few years for those programs, considering some of the other schools that were after Witherspoon. It's a pretty good mix to be involved with, and I think you've got to feel good if you're Pitt about Witherspoon. They clearly like what they see in him. He is the lowest rated on 24/7 Sports and on 3 of the bunch that is still considering Pitt in 2025. But I don't think Pitt cares about that at all. I mean, he's what I think 133rd on 3. Bub Carrington was 98th, right, going into his senior year. So he's a lottery pick less than a year later. Rankings don't mean that much, clearly, to a lot of coaches around the country. To Pitt, they're willing to go and grab a guy who's top 140 as opposed to just getting guys who are in the top 100. I think a lot of coaches across the country would agree with that. But they love what they see in Witherspoon. It's clear. I mean, this has moved pretty quickly this summer since they offered him and since they had him on campus on Sunday and Monday. The next day, he drops a top 3 and Pitt's in it. Like, he still had visits to Virginia Tech and Butler on the agenda, just went ahead and cut them out of his recruitment. West Virginia got a visit from him over the weekend, too, before he came up to Pitt. They got cut from the recruitment. So, got to be a good sign seeing Witherspoon include the Panthers in his top 3. When you talk to people about him, I'm starting to have more conversations with scouts, with coaches, with people in the DMV area that have seen him, that know him. And it's a lot of the same language that we heard about Bub Carrington coming out of high school, like late bloomer, underrated, long, guard who can play on and off the ball. I'm really intrigued to see Witherspoon play. Hopefully I can get down to see him this fall if he does commit to Pitt this winter. But there's a lot of similarities, a lot of things to like about him if you're a Pitt fan. He goes to the same high school that Ish Leggett went to, St. John's College Prep in DC. Again, just a DMV kid. That's Milan Brown's wheelhouse, man. Like the 6'4" long guards from the DMV seem to be something that Pitt's gotten very comfortable with. So Amari Witherspoon is the first on the list that we're going to go through. Next, we've got Meleek Thomas. Everyone who's watching this show, I would assume, knows about Meleek Thomas. He's the 5-star. He's from Pittsburgh, played at Lincoln Park for the last 3 years. Now he's down at Overtime Elite in Atlanta. We talked to a source close to Malik this week, and he's got 4 programs coming to visit him this week. He's got coaches from Pitt, from Arkansas, from UConn, and from Kansas State going to see him this week. So those schools are all still in the mix, all still going for Malik pretty hard. UConn's been in it for a while. I mean, you win 2 national championships in a row. That's got to help a lot. So that's going to be a tough one to beat in itself. Arkansas, the Calipari connection has gone back years. In the beginning, Thomas has had an awesome recruitment to follow, like huge names, huge storylines throughout. Now the Overtime Elite thing just adds a lot to it. But in the beginning of this recruitment, it seemed like it was Pitt, the hometown school, and Kentucky were like the 2 names you heard a lot when he's a sophomore and he's a junior. And he was still a 5-star then. So he was a big name. He's been a big name for a while. Calipari leaves Kentucky, goes to Arkansas, and instantly, Mark Pope, I believe, reached out to Thomas and established that connection. But it was Arkansas. It was a Calipari thing, clearly. So Arkansas is a big player in this recruitment. They are hosting a couple other big time prospects, big time guard prospects in the class of 2025. So not sure how that'll affect things, but expect Arkansas to stay in this one till the end with that Calipari Western PA connection to Thomas. He's built a great relationship with Malik. Kansas State, Jerome Tang, Nate Oates in Alabama. They're all over Thomas as well. He will visit Arkansas and Alabama here in the Alabama in late September, Arkansas in early October, according to a source close to Thomas. He told us that. So a lot of schools still in the mix for Malik. I mean, obviously it speaks for itself how talented he is. We've seen him play in the Pete. We've seen him at the Pete for countless Pitt games. He's had a ticket to I think every Pitt home game the past 2 years, right? Like he's always sitting behind the basket. First it was with Brandon Cummings. Now potentially if he comes up for another game this year on an unofficial visit to watch his former teammate Brandon Cummings on Pitt. So Malik, huge name. We all know about him. Still one to watch. Still a lot going on in that recruitment. So it's been thrilling to watch Malik's recruitment play out. We next go to Isaiah Denis, another long 6'4", 6'5" guard. Denis from North Carolina. He took a visit to Pitt over the weekend. I would assume it went well. It looked like it went well according to social media and everything. Trying to get Isaiah back on the show to talk about how it went. But you got to assume that went well. Kids seem to like coming to Pitt, coming on these visits, especially looking at what Omari did. Omari Witherspoon cutting his list a day after getting home from Pitt. Denis will be at Ohio State this weekend. He's still got some pretty big names on his recruiting board there. So I wouldn't expect that one to wrap up terribly soon compared to some of the other guys on this list. Nikola Bundalo, super intriguing prospect at a Western Reserve Academy in Ohio. He's a guy, he's a really exciting guy to watch. I think he'll be really good in college, 6'9", 6'10", long wing. He's got a lot of tools. Got some huge heavy hitters on him still. Took an official visit to UConn this past weekend again. Those official visit photos that UConn's taken with these recruits are just, I don't know how you can compete with those if you're a school that hasn't won a natty in the last 5 years. They've got them sitting up on the rim on the hoop that's lowered down to the ground, holding 2 national championship trophies. So UConn's Dan Hurley's doing a great job. I mean, it's tough to compete with those guys for anyone. But again, Bundalo's got a lot of big names on him. Haven't heard a ton of buzz around Pitt there, but they are still in the mix. Took an unofficial visit to Pitt a while ago, still going to see if that turns into an official anytime soon or how that recruitment plays out. Amari Evans, another guard from Overtime Elite, who's originally from Pittsburgh. Amari started at Bishop Canavan, went down to Overtime Elite a few years ago. He visited Tennessee this past weekend. He's already taken his Pitt official. So he was at Tennessee and Knoxville this past weekend. He's got some more Southern schools, Ole Miss and TCU coming up. He's also going to visit Sean Miller at Xavier. So a lot of schools still in the mix for Amari, but I think Pitt would be thrilled to land the commitment of Amari Evans, another local kid who they really seem to like. Davion Hannah's next on the list. Davion's probably been the quietest. I mean, in terms of Pitt's angle, the quietest of the bunch. His visit's not until October 19th. So he's scheduled to be on campus at Pitt on October 19th for an official. But we just really haven't heard much of him. Not that many interviews. He's not really talking about his recruitment too much. He was at Alabama recently. He's got Louisville this upcoming weekend. Lots of schools are still in this recruitment. I think that's why there hasn't been too much buzz around it. There's still a lot of Big Ten, a lot of ACC programs. Cincinnati's in there as well. So a lot going on with Davion Hannah, but really intriguing prospect. I saw some videos of him, and scouts, reporters seem to really like his skill set. Then the final player on this list, I think, is a huge one. I mean, it's tough to say that one guy is at the very top of Pitt's recruiting board. Looking at these guys, obviously Malik being the hometown kid, having these storylines with him, like the hometown kid, the best talent, most talented, according to a lot of scouts and people around the game, the most talented prospect on this list, Meleek Thomas, from Pittsburgh. The story writes itself, right? If he came back to Pitt as a hometown kid. So I think he'd probably be near that top of the list. But I mean, Derek Dixon, out of DC, Gonzaga. I mean, he's got to be. I think Pitt really wants him. I think he's really, really near the top of their wish list I would say. I mean, they've been on him for years. Milan Brown has a great relationship with Derek and his dad. He's been to Pitt 3 times now, twice for an unofficial, once for an official earlier this year, earlier this summer. We talked to him about that. You can watch that episode on our YouTube channel, Pittsburgh Sports Now. But Derek told me that this week, Jeff Capel and Milan Brown will both be in to see him in DC in practice. So Pitt's still on him hard. I really think based on what we've seen from them with the unofficials, with the official visit, based on conversations I've had, I think Pitt really wants Derek Dixon. That would be a huge win in their recruiting world with schools like North Carolina and Arizona still yet to get visits from Dixon. He'll be there the rest of September. And he told Adam Zagoria that September 27th is a date that he's thinking about committing. So we've got a few weeks left in the Derek Dixon sweepstakes. Visits to some huge name programs, North Carolina and Arizona, with Tommy Lloyd and Hubert Davis. So that'll be a really interesting recruitment to follow. But stay tuned on PSN on Pittsburgh Sports Now. Shoot me any questions you got on Twitter at Mike Olowski CBB, and we'll keep you posted. See you later.